I grew up in the Hiram, Georgia area for the last 32 years, starting in 1990 until the present time. I currently live in Dallas, Georgia, which is about 10 miles from the scene of the derailment. Over the years, I have rail fanned in the exact spot where the derailment occurred many times. In fact, here are some clips in that very spot from 2013 that I took. Now let's look at the area where this derailment occurred. In 2013, I actually took these pictures of the exact siding and rail section where this derailment occurred. Who knew that just 9 years later, the derailment would occur in the exact spot where these pictures were taken? Even back then, you could actually see there was a little bit of debris pushed out of off to the side where now the cars came to land in this ravine. This siding is the original siding for the Hiram Depot, which used to exist towards the end of this siding back towards the road area. The depot there was originally here in 1990 whenever we moved here, and probably remained there until the late 90s when it was eventually demolished and taken down about the same time as the car dealership was built next to on the other side of the tracks across the road from where this depot used to sit. Interestingly enough, the car dealership that is there was named the Hiram Depot, and its building, the actual sales building, was built to kind of resemble what the depot used to look like in Hiram, but much bigger than the depot actually was that used to sit on the track siding there. Today, this siding is used only for storage of maintenance cars by the railroad. It's not ever been used for anything other than that since. It is a dead-end siding. It's not very long. The most number of cars you could fit on it was maybe 4 or 5 cars at the most. And interestingly enough, at the time of this derailment, there were actually at least 2 maintenance cars sitting there on the siding, which contained replacement switches for use on the railroad. And interestingly enough, I actually heard one of the maintenance crew guys as they walked by talking about the fact that those cars were sitting there before the derailment occurred, and that it was good that they were, because they actually needed one of the switches to replace the one that was destroyed, and thought they could make use of one of the switches off of these cars to take its place. So now let's take a look at the actual aerial footage, or that aerial map area where this event occurred. This is a larger area showing the tracks leading into Hiram from Powder Springs. Powder Springs is towards the right side of the map, and going towards Dallas is to the left. So the train was going basically from right to left. Now, as you can see here, there is a curve, a rather large curve here in this area. And there's actually a double track section here. Now it's unclear to me as to which track the train was on at the time of derailment. I do know that both sections of the track was replaced, both main tracks here. So it's possible that he could have been on the top portion, the northern section of track instead of the southern section of track, and flew off the north and actually ran across the south and damaged the south, or it could have just been they replaced both sections just because of damage to both of them that occurred from the derailment or something. I just don't know, but I do know that both sections are replaced. The siding, as we can see here, spawns off a little bit from the tracks, the southern track that goes into Hiram. You can see how kind of short it is, but this zoomed out view, I wanted you to see just how big this basically vacant ravine is that sits next to the tracks here. And I'm not exactly sure about this, but knowing Hiram's history, back in the whenever Hiram was founded back in the 1850s, 1860s, there was a cotton gin that existed in the Hiram area. Now, there's actually, interestingly enough, there is a restaurant, or what remains of an old historic restaurant, called the Cotton Gin that sits more south than this actual location, but not that much south, like maybe a mile or so. So I've always kind of wondered if the actual Cotton Gin sat in this ravine, which I actually think it did, or if the Cotton Gin sit where the restaurant was, which was back maybe another mile or so, south of the rail spot. But I actually think the Cotton Gin existed in historic downtown Hiram in this ravine. Anyway, this is a more zoomed in view of the the derailment area. And as you can see here, we can see a lot more detail of where the cars came to rest. And like I said, there's this curve here, so there is a possibility that they entered this curve too quickly and lost control. But as we saw in the last picture, the more zoomed out picture, that curve is a very long curve. And if that was the case, one would think that they would have lost control back up further, up near the Angham crossing back towards Powder Springs in the woods, rather than making it all the way to the Hiram siding and then losing control there. Now, like we know, there is a switch there in Hiram for the siding, and where the derailment occurred, it looks to me like it was a little bit before the switch rather than at the switch itself. But we don't know. We do know that the leading locomotive is more it's ahead of everything else that piled up behind it. So it's possible that it made it to the switch, crashed the switch, and then destroyed the track behind it due to the impact with the switch and whatever failed with the switch mechanism. And then from there, due to the damage, everything just piled and kind of flung off the rails, back behind it and piled up in a big pile behind it. So that's a main possibility. I think that the most likely cause here of this derailment is the switch for the siding. Now, as I said before, this siding, this switch, it's not one that's widely used a lot at all. Like I said, it's only ever used for maintenance, for storing of cars for the railroad, for storage reasons. It's only 5 or 6, car lengths long at the most. So rarely ever was that switch ever used. And it was a manual switch. It's not an automatic switch. I would tend to believe that this rail line here, this main rail that runs from Chattanooga all the way down to Austell and joins up with the main east-west Norfolk Southern line. The east and west named for Norfolk Southern line is the most busiest railway in the Georgia area. It sees the most amount of traffic in the Atlanta area and in the entire Georgia area. So there's a lot of traffic that goes basically from Austell into downtown Atlanta. That is the most busiest section. Now, but this section, it spurs off in Austell and goes north to Chattanooga. It sees a whole lot of rail traffic, but it's not as much as the Austell branch, because the Austell's got the east and west and the north-south going as well from that spur. So there is a lot of traffic that goes across this area here. And that, that means there's a lot of wear, there's a lot of stress on these rails from all that traffic. So it's possible that switch over the years, saw a lot of wear and got to the point where it was just so damaged and, in need of replacement. And one would guess, the point that, these cars are here with these switches on them kind of leads me to believe that more than likely the railroad knew that these tracks were near the end of life and needed, some replacement and some repair. So they got these cars staged, ready to go for an eventual, replacement job. But before they could get around to doing that, apparently, the switch gave out. Now, it's interesting to the fact that, these cars had been stored here on the siding before the derailment occurred. And, it leads me to kind of question and wonder, how long have these cars been sitting here before the derailment occurred? Is it possible that when the switch was thrown and then put back, that it was only a matter of time until, the next train or something came over it, and the switch, because it had been disturbed and then put back, maybe that the switch at that point, didn't line up properly anymore, was damaged or whatever. It was just a matter of time until a train came across it, and that was it. There was no, no going back, basically. So that's what I'm kind of leading to believe, is that this switch failed probably due to excessive wear and tear on the switch from all the traffic that goes across it here in this high volume area. And then, they put these storage cars on it and they disturb the switch and they put them on. And when they put it back, it didn't line up properly due to all the wear and tear and the rough life that switch has seen. And it was just a matter of time until it derailed. That's kind of where I'm leading to believe is the cause of this derailment. We'll find out when the report comes out, but that's kind of what I'm leaning to believe. Now here are some clips of the wreckage pictures that I took, as well as some video. The video is not the best of quality. I didn't realize that whenever I was capturing it at all. So just keep that in mind. I apologize about the quality, but it is what it is. Let me also point out that whenever I took all of these pictures and video, that I did so about 18 hours from the original crash that took place. At that time, really, the rails had been replaced, and we were actually moving trains back and forth across the repaired section. So that was good, but the actual cleanup for the derailment, all the cars and the locomotives, had not yet taken place. And as we can see in these photos, you've got the lead locomotive that hit the gravel on its side, kind of more to the east of everything else that piled up behind it. The other two trailing locomotives are actually standing upright next to each other, furthest away from where all the cars stacked up behind it. So they're off sitting kind of by themselves, amazingly enough. And they look like, there's nothing wrong with them. They're just sitting there. I mean, sure, they're damaged and all. And we can see, like one of the other YouTubers pointed out, that there is actual damage on the cab side structure of one of the trailing locomotives as well. So that's an interesting part of that as well, is where did that damage come from? What caused the damage to the side of that locomotive whenever it's standing upright, and the corner would have been the outside corner, not the inside corner of that locomotive. So that's a little bit of an interesting thing on that, is what caused that damage. I do know also that one thing I noticed on site that I didn't get pictures of is that there was some sort of a railroad electrical box or panel or something back in the woods that probably operated the signals for this area where the double track comes together and joins into a single track further down towards Angham Road. And anyways, that signal box was hit by some of the cars and damaged. So I don't know if that occurred, during the initial point of the derailment or later, as more and more cars fell off the tracks. In total, there was 11 cars that came off the tracks out of 88. So this was an 88 car long train, which honestly is I would say about the fair length of most trains that come through this area is about 88 cars. I have seen longer and definitely have seen shorter, but 88 seems about the average size of the train length that comes through this area. Now, all of my pictures only show tanker cars that piled up behind the locomotives. And that was originally all that I thought had come off the rails and piled up was these cars that I saw. But actually what I saw later from other YouTubers, drone videos and whatnot, especially from the news, was that behind them were actually some box cars that stacked up behind the tankers and apparently a pole car that was carrying telephone poles as well. So didn't realize that there was actually more that I couldn't see from ground area behind the tankers.
Yeah, I got you, Brian.